If these 10 assassinations were successful, what would the world look like today? Number 10. Queen Victoria. On May 29, 1842, Queen Victoria narrowly escaped an assassination attempt by John Francis. Francis, who was a dissatisfied and unstable man, fired a pistol at the Queen's carriage as she rode through London. His motives were not entirely clear, but they seemed to be rooted in personal frustration and a desire for attention. Must have been a middle child. He was captured the following day after a second failed attempt, where Francis was initially sentenced to death. However, Queen Victoria showed mercy, commuting his sentence to life transportation to Australia. Oof. I don't know which one is worse. If Francis succeeded in killing Queen Victoria, the British monarchy would have been thrown into turmoil, where her son Prince Albert Edward was far too young to assume the throne, which would have required a regency. This period of uncertainty might have slowed the industrial and colonial expansion that defined the Victorian era, which would make the British Empire's dominance in the 19th century significantly different, reshaping the geopolitical landscape of the modern world. Number 9. Charles de Gaulle. On August 22, 1962, French President Charles de Gaulle survived a deadly assassination attempt by the organization Armée Secrète, also known as the OAS. The OAS was a far-right paramilitary group that brutally opposed Algerian independence and saw de Gaulle's policies as a betrayal of French colonial interests. During an ambush in Petit Clamart, machine guns fired at de Gaulle's convoy, but the president miraculously escaped unharmed. I can just imagine his silhouette being etched by bullets like the intro for Trigun. Anyway, the conspirators were quickly apprehended, with several executed and others imprisoned. But if de Gaulle had been assassinated, France would have been thrown into political chaos during a fragile transition from the Fourth to the Fifth Republic, and France's colonial policies could have hardened, prolonging conflict in North Africa, where without de Gaulle's steady leadership, modern France might have faced prolonged instability and weakened international influence. Number 8. Mahatma Gandhi. Now, I'm probably guessing that most of you were not expecting Gandhi to be on this list, but in 1934, he narrowly escaped an assassination attempt in Pune when a bomb was planted during one of his speeches. Though the attack failed, it showed the growing hostility Gandhi faced from extremist factions. And the plotters, believed to have connections to Hindu nationalist groups, opposed Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence and his efforts to bridge religious divides. And I think that's hilarious, because these guys opposed peace. Like, what type of douchebag do you have to be in order to hate nonviolence? Anyway, if Gandhi had been killed in 1934, the Indian independence movement might have taken a very different path, where his absence could have left a leadership void, potentially leading to a more violent resistance against British rule, and the partition of India and Pakistan might have been even bloodier, with heightened communal tensions. Also, Gandhi's global message of peaceful resistance might never have inspired later movements for civil rights and social justice. Number 7. Abraham Lincoln. Now, I already spoke about this in a previous video, but for those who didn't know, before his inauguration, Abraham Lincoln narrowly avoided an assassination attempt in Baltimore on February 23, 1861. That is when pro-Southern conspirators plotted to kill Lincoln as he traveled to Washington, D.C. for his inauguration, but thanks to Detective Alan Pinkerton, the plot was uncovered, and Lincoln was secretly rerouted through Baltimore under heavy guard. The conspirators were never prosecuted, but their intentions were clear: to prevent Lincoln from taking office and advancing his anti-slavery agenda. If the plot succeeded, the United States might have been plunged into chaos at the dawn of the Civil War, where without Lincoln's leadership, the Union could have fragmented, and slavery might have persisted for decades longer, making it a possibility that the United States as a unified and powerful nation to never emerge, massively altering global history from how we know it today. Number 6. Napoleon Bonaparte. On December 24, 1800, Napoleon Bonaparte narrowly escaped to death when royalist conspirators detonated a bomb known as the Infernal Machine as he traveled to the opera in Paris. The attack was orchestrated by Pierre Saint-Regent and other royalists who hoped to end Napoleon's rule and restore the Bourbon monarchy, and I just need to ask, why? They sucked. Though the explosion caused significant casualties, Napoleon emerged unscathed, and unsurprisingly, Saint-Regent was executed, and other conspirators faced severe punishments. If the plot succeeded, European history would have been dramatically altered, since the Napoleonic Wars would have never occurred, and would have prevented the reshaping of Europe through conquest and diplomacy, where the Congress of Vienna, which established a new European balance of power, might have never been assembled, leaving the continent politically fragmented. Number 5. Ronald Reagan. You know what, just assume any president mentioned on this list I already probably covered in this video, but anyway, on March 30th, 1981, US President Ronald Reagan was shot and seriously wounded by John Hinckley Jr. outside a Washington, D.C. hotel. Hinckley, obsessed with actress Jodie Foster, hoped the assassination would impress her somehow. Though Reagan was gravely injured, he survived after emergency surgery. But Hinckley was declared not guilty by reason of insanity and spent decades in a psychiatric hospital before his release in 2016. I need her to love me. Alright, buddy, you're crazy. If Reagan had died, Vice President George H.W. Bush would have assumed the presidency much earlier, and the conservative revolution of the 1980s, including Reaganomics and aggressive Cold War strategies, might have taken a different course, or straight up have never happened. But also, the United States' approach to the Soviet Union and the war on drugs might have been significantly altered. Number 4. Pope John Paul II. This pope was shot and seriously wounded in St. Peter's Square by Turkish gunman Mehmet Ali Atka on May 13, 1981. The motives behind the attack remain unclear, with theories ranging from extremist ideologies to geopolitical conspiracies. Atka was apprehended immediately and sentenced to life in prison, but somehow he was later pardoned and extradited to Turkey. Had the Pope died, his influential role in supporting the Solidarity movement in Poland might have been lost, where the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe could have been delayed, and the Cold War might have persisted longer. Since John Paul II's spiritual and political leadership was instrumental in shaping modern Europe. Number 3. Franklin D. Roosevelt. On February 15, 1933, an anarchist named Giuseppe Zangara attempted to assassinate President-elect Franklin D. Roosevelt in Miami. Zangara fired several shots at Roosevelt, missing all of them, but fatally wounding Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak, where Zangara was swiftly tried and executed. If Zangara had better aim, Vice President John Nance Garner would have taken office, where the New Deal, Roosevelt's ambitious plan to pull the U.S. out of the Great Depression, might have never been enacted, delaying economic recovery and changing who would have been the leader of the United States during World War II. Number 2. John F. Kennedy. A plot to assassinate President-elect John F. Kennedy in Chicago was uncovered and foiled by the FBI on December 1960. The conspirators, believed to be Cuban sympathizers, planned to attack Kennedy during a motorcade. If the attempt had succeeded, Lyndon B. Johnson would have assumed office much earlier, and the Vietnam War, Civil Rights Movement, and the Cuban Missile Crisis might have unfolded way differently than how we know it happened today. Kennedy's leadership was so important that it is unknown if any of us would be alive without it, since he changed the course of the Cold War for the better, and America's domestic progress might have been significantly altered. But sadly, as we all know, he was assassinated anyway, only 3 years after this initial attempt. Number 1. Adolf Hitler. This failed assassination attempt is probably the saddest and would have been the most impactful assassination in human history, where on July 20th, 1944, German officers led by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg attempted to assassinate Adolf Hitler with a bomb planted in his briefing room. Although the explosion killed several people, it of course failed to kill the only person it was actually meant for, where Hitler survived with minor injuries and went on to do much worse than what was done to him. The conspirators were swiftly executed and thousands of suspected traitors were purged. If Hitler had been killed, like he should have been, World War II might have ended sooner or have never started in the first place, saving millions of lives. And Germany might have avoided post-war division, and the Cold War might have taken a different shape or no shape at all, since it probably would have never happened. I can only imagine the sadness this person was probably experiencing in heaven. Was ist das? Man, I should have put the bomb right under his ass. That is a rough German accent, if I've ever said one. I think it is really interesting to think and wonder about how the world would have looked if these assassination attempts were successful. Where on one hand, I'm very glad some of them failed, and on the other, I wish they went with a more extreme path. Anyway, thank you all for watching, please like and subscribe, Poppy, and I'll see you in another episode.